Okay, so I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome some new colleagues visiting us here on the Hersley site, some awesome people from the magnificent structure that is Cloudant Towers from Bristol. So gentlemen, welcome.
Hello.
Can I quickly go around the table and ask you to introduce yourselves?
I'm Mike, the developer advocate, polyglot developer and hacker at large.
I'm Kim Stibble. I work on documentation for Cloudant, but I'm not supposed to say documentation anymore because Cloudant is a document database.
I'm Simon Metzen. I'm their chauffeur. I make the tea.
I'm John McNamara. I work for IBM messaging and I'm an information architect.
Cool. So, first question to ask. What is Cloudant?
Oh, Adrian.
I'm glad you asked, Adrian.
Yeah. To be fair, we ought to point out that I'm a new member of the Cloudant team, so I've only been working with Cloudant for about 2 weeks. So Cloudant is
A document database available via a very simple HTTP RESTful API. We store JSON data, and the key thing is that we run it as a service, so our customers don't have to provision hardware, they don't have to worry about sort of monitoring or alerting on their cluster, and we can scale those things to sort of hundreds of nodes, hundreds of terabytes of data, and we do it. Cloudant's around for about 6 years prior to acquisition by IBM. We had sort of lots of kind of small games companies that kind of grew very, very large. They'd sort of launch games that are very successful and suddenly have millions of people playing it, and then that would be a headache. So we help those kind of companies kind of scale up, and as well as doing sort of the fun consumer end, we've also been doing stuff with sort of banks and biotech companies and things like that. So people that have kind of a scaling data problem, where their time to market is a key thing, they want to be quick, they want to be agile, and not have to run it themselves. That's the sort of thing that we go after. We've been running on SoftLayer from day one, so that was kind of a nice, for want of a less business word, synergy.
Ting!
Someone
everybody have a drink.
There's a bingo card. 2 little ducks. There, so that was kind of nice. We're big fans of SoftLayer, know them well. We're now part of IBM and kind of navigating what that means. In the UK, we've got about, I think about 25 people now, most of whom are in Bristol, apart from when they get driven up to Hersley. We've got a guy in Aberdeen and another one in Windsor, and then a few people kind of, it's mainly salespeople, kind of work remotely and kind of in. And Adrian works everywhere.
Yeah.
He does.
Yes. I fly in.
On his personal jet. Come work for Cloud and you get a jet. No, it's not true. Cool.
So one of the things that I picked up on very early when I joined the team was the difference between traditional database technologies, your relational databases, that sort of thing, where you have a very, very well-defined structure, the schema, in contrast to something like the document-oriented database structure of Cloudant. And the way that I like to describe that is it's a bit like the difference between a spreadsheet model for the relational database, where you've got your rows and your columns, you've got a very well-defined structure, versus something like, dare one say it, a collection of post-it notes, where you've got a unique ID on each post-it note, but what you choose to put onto the post-it note is entirely up to you. It could be text, it could be media, it could be a graphic image, something like that. Is that too simplistic a representation, do you think? Or?
It's not a bad one. I think that the thing with spreadsheets is that if you're not careful, I can have a relational table that's got 5 columns, and I can have a spreadsheet that's got 500, right? And spreadsheets, I like to think of spreadsheets as the first NoSQL database, actually, because you can really abuse a spreadsheet.
I like the way you said that.
Thrashing.
I mean, there can be, you can stick an image in a cell, you can have music playing it, you can write sort of custom code and stuff. And whilst columns 1 through 4 might have a schema, name, age, address, postcode. I can then put in row 5 hair colour that's there or not there. Row 10 is car that's driven as well. So actually, the individual rows, there might be some structure, but it's not guaranteed across all of the rows. And that's actually very much like a document store where my application might make sure that name and age is always recorded for a person document, but then I might have an application where someone can tag it as a friend, or other piece of the documents in the database might be tagged as sort of with addresses or whatever. And so then I've got this there's some structure there. It's not completely unstructured data, but there's also fuzzy bits where it may or may not exist, and that's something that relational stores either don't like or don't perform well if you are taking that to the extremes kind of thing. And that's sort of where Cloudant fits kind of nicely, I think.
Okay.
So the Postnote's not a bad one, because it could also be completely, like I could have 1 million documents about 1 million different things with completely 1 million different schemas, essentially. But a spreadsheet's kind of a nice kind of halfway house between a Post-it note and a relational table.
Cool. So for our listener, that problem.
What's his name?
He doesn't know that
actually
to
Phil's
listening.
mum.
So for our listener,
His voice.
if you had to encapsulate the problem that Cloudant solves in one sentence, could you do that?
So I think the thing that Cloudant does uniquely is take this whole kind of NoSQL world and kind of bundle it up and run it as a completely managed cloud delivered service.
Wow. Okay.
And that's something that I think is actually quite special. It's quite interesting. The technology under the hood is built on lots of open source technologies, and we have a large kind of contributor base back to those projects, which is nice. And that stuff is interesting, but it's not actually. I think that's not the unique piece of it. The unique piece is that we've got this business model that is cloud, and we've worked out a way of doing both the kind of long tail pay as you go, people spending $5 a month, to the people spending $250,000 a month,
right?
And being able to sort of span that scale point is actually that's the interesting piece, I think, for me.
Understood.
And I think that was the bit that IBM was interested in.
Yes.
They like that one.
Me too.
So it's that kind of the core technology underneath it is the thing that empowers that, but the thing that's unique is that it is the service.
So Mike, your role is developer advocate. What does that involve?
As far as I have been able to realise, it's instead of speaking to CIOs and the more management perspective, it's talking to developers and helping them understand and enabling them to become advocates of the technology as it is. So being able to bring the concept of document data stores to developers and for use of a clustered multi-tenant version. But yeah, introducing the technology to more and more developers, because at the moment it's only been the last 3 years that document data stores and NoSQL has been actively used by development. I believe the longest standing Mongo company in the UK, Servidenti, has only been running that in anger for 2.5 years. So there's still a huge amount of education that requires to be done at that level.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that the UK definitely is about 18 to 24 months behind adoption on NoSQL stuff. There were certainly some early adopters, so Last.fm used Hadoop very early on. There are certainly people in the UK that are building fun things on or with, working for companies like Cloudant, Cloudera, Hortonworks, all that people in Bristol even, because Bristol's brilliant and everyone should move there. I get a kickback from the Carrots Club. Discount on my
You're the
council tax.
tourism board of Bristol.
Yeah, it's that bad now. But I think in terms of sort of adoption by companies, we're a bit behind than the US, and it's just sort of Silicon Valley brain drain type problem, I think, possibly. But what's nice is that it's becoming more normal. People are picking it up, and software sort of downstream from the database is starting to exist. So people are building CRMs on top of a NoSQL store, and so suddenly someone chooses a CRM and they get the NoSQL store, whether they like it or not, kind of thing, and then they learn all the fun and interesting properties of their thing that may or may not do what it wants. But and so the advocacy role, having people that can go out and sort of to what our business unit leader calls speak geek to people and do that kind of grassroots thing is actually a really important part from how we grew Cloudant in the US. We certainly saw that kind of going bottom up was a very, you can get people interested in the technology and then they'll solve the management problem.
It does seem to be a more common model now, doesn't it? In the old days, you would have a salesperson go in and convince the hire people that this was a solution to their problems, and then it would percolate down into a technical implementation. That's almost been completely inverted.
And the interesting thing is that we're seeing budgets move out of. So the person who has the budget for some compute might be in the marketing department, and their budget that they want to spend is, say we've got an event in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time. We've got $100,000 to spend for this event. We want to build an app for that event, showcasing blah, right? It's a throwaway thing, and then because it's a short window between making that decision and the event is fixed in time. If you've got a 12-week procurement process in there and you've only got 6 weeks to the event, then people start saying, well, IT's too slow, right? And so that's where cloud providers have sort of capitalised, right? What IBM's, I think, thinking about is how to say, well, actually we can bridge the gap between your CMO, who's spending money on things that IT department doesn't like, and your CIO, who's desperately trying to wrangle stuff and make sure that, if the crown jewels piece of data accidentally snuck out because your CMO's kind of paid the wrong kind of company or whatever, then that's a problem for the CIO, not the CMO. And so having IBM be able to say, well, here's ways of making both kind of groups happy. That seems to be kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, cool. So, Kim, you work on the documentation. How did you get to join Cloudant? What was your background, your experience before joining?
Before I joined Cloudant, I was working as a contractor, and in that role, as a software developer, and used CouchDB quite a bit. So I already had the technical knowledge. I had also worked as a technical writer, so that fit kind of nicely with Cloudant. I worked from Germany as a contractor for a while, and then after some time, decided to
Forced
got the
into
offer.
And I got
Nice
10%
offer
kickback from the council for it. So.
Wow.
Not from Germany, I think.
No, I'm not allowed to go to Germany now. They want Kim back. So I think IRC evolved and was basically because that was how the open source CouchDB project. So you should probably say Cloudant is based on top of CouchDB. That's kind of the core piece of the document store. And so most of our DB core committers came to us through the CouchDB project. So they were working on Couch in their spare time or in a previous employer, and then Cloudant sort of said, hey, would you like to do this for money? And quite a few people have, since joining Cloudant, got the commit bit on the Apache project as well. So that's a nice thing. IRC is the way that community communicates, and so we've sort of carried that over, I think. And it's also a fairly common kind of way for dev folk to talk to one another. The Stack Exchange thing was, I think, more explicit, and we actually sort of chose to do that. And the conversation there was, everyone goes to Stack Exchange when they have a question. How are we going to make everyone come to us? And the answer is they're not. And so actually choosing to go where the people are made a lot of sense. It meant that we didn't have to stand up a bunch of sort of QA and moderation and all this sort of stuff of a thing. you could argue it sort of diluted the brand or whatever, but I think actually it strengthens it because it's showing activity of the community, and we can have Cloudant people answering CouchDB questions, because quite often CouchDB is, question for Couch is going to be a question for Cloudant, and we can sort of show that's a lively and interesting project, and kill sort of 2 or 3 birds with a pebble, not the watch. That everyone's wearing. Yeah, so the Stack Exchange stuff was more this is where the people that we're trying to talk to are. So let's go there, as opposed to try and entice them to something that's not that.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting, as a startup company, that makes tons of sense, right? Because there's no vested interest and there's no history or whatever. For a company like IBM, that's a bit different, right? Because something like Developer Works, which is a well-known resource, lots of really great content, and so one of the things I think you, Adrian, are going to have to solve.
For the listener, someone's now pointing at him.
With a spotlight.
And a whip. Understanding how IBM is going to sort of interact with those, or how Cloudant as IBM is going to interact with that still. Because we need to get content on Developer Works, because that's an IBM sort of property, and people need to see it. But we also need to make sure that people asking questions about that content in Stack Overflow are getting answered questions and getting routed to that. Stack, I think, is a good place to ask and answer a question. It's a bad place to actually store the answer, if that makes sense. I like when I go to a Stack Exchange site that says this is the definitive way of doing it, link to Python documentation or whatever. That's a nice thing. And I think taking what we're doing and sort of merging those two things is going to be interesting.
But it may be that that's really the foretaste of the way that development is going to be going in the future. I mean, we've already mentioned about how the old style model of salespeople going in, driving sales, which pass down to technical, that is being inverted in some cases, and it may be that what we're talking about here in terms of awareness, product information, that sort of thing, same sort of thing is happening. So if questions and answers are being collated on a site like Stack Exchange, not necessarily because Stack Exchange is better or worse than anywhere else, but just because that's the way everybody goes, that doesn't stop us from having a curation activity into a more definitive set of answers.
And that's what we were trying to do with Cloud and stuff. Like we were making sure that we were answering questions on Stack, because that's where people were asking them.
Yes. And
we didn't want to have we do things like if someone asked a question, especially if it's a multi-tenant customer, if they asked us an interesting question that our support team kind of answered, we would say, would you mind reposting this to Stack Overflow so that we can do it publicly? And just kind of for a cloudy kind of company, having people sort of self-support is actually a route to sort of scale, right? Like if every 5,000 sign-ups require one person to manage the support of those people, then you're going to have a hard time dealing with the number of customers that you want to get to the economics don't work out. So being able to kind of give people enough information, push it out there, and put it where they're going to find it was the key thing. That's where Stack came in. We certainly point back to docs.cloudant.com, which will soon be called guides.cloudant.com. In Adrian's war against double use of a word. So we had a sort of an authoritative source that this is the place that you want to read the thing, but someone will still ask a question, and being able to point that, here's the guide on how you do backup or whatever is a thing. I think the interesting piece is that developers don't remember anything anymore. Like I can't remember anything. It's like Google. And it's really embarrassing, actually. It's annoying because you get into this lazy habit of like, how do I do this? Of course I know.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I thought it was me losing my mind as I'm getting older. But
we're both lazy.
And then it could be,
I'm pretty sure most degrees should now be Google.
Yes. Well, I have heard Google described as everybody's second brain. For exactly that reason. So, earlier this year, Cloudant started the process of being acquired by IBM. I'm interested to hear from each of you. What's the thing that has most surprised you about IBM? What's it like being part of a big company now?
So it reminds me a lot of before I was in Cloudant, I worked at CERN, and that kind of like Hersley's a lot like Rutherford Appleton Labs. and quite a lot like a nice version of the CERN campus, except there's not so many tunnels, not so big tunnels. So that kind of thing is kind of familiar and stuff. That's kind of. I've been astounded at the procurement process for Apple Macs, and I won't say anything more about that.
I'm sure in a good way.
But it's, the other thing that I've noticed, which is going to sound kind of dumb, but everyone I've met in IBM has been really nice, and it's that kind of thing where there's obviously at least in IBM UK, I haven't met that many people in the US, and they're probably all lovely as well. But certainly everyone I've met in Hursley, when I've been to South Bank and stuff like that, there's this sort of, it's kind of a, you have to be this nice to work at IBM. Like I've seen very few kind of people being idiots or annoying and stuff, and that's kind of something I was sort of kind of taken aback by, in that you would think in a company this size there would be a few more people who should be beeped over. Kind of thing. So that's actually really good.
Cool.
The mentality here is wonderful. Everybody's got it's great. Everybody knows what they need to do. They get on with it, and even better, they're wonderful at pointing in the direction of the people you need to talk to get the bit you need to get done, which is great. The problem is when you don't know the person you need to talk to, finding the middle bit is a little bit. Everybody should have a signpost strapped to them so I know exactly where I'm going.
Yeah, especially in Hursley, it's a rabbit warren.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I mean to get T-shirts saying "I'm a wild duck, treasure me."
So in terms of being out in the community, I know you mentioned we had a conversation earlier on about McIntyre Coffee, which led us on nicely into Shoreditch and Thing Monk and Monkey Gra. So what interesting hacking communities have you been talking to, or developer communities have you been talking to that have really made an impact?
Well, so first thing, we were at a very good conference this weekend on Friday, which is All Your Base, and Mike was bouncing around there like a sort of
overexcited child.
yeah, and Adrian was tweeting like a demon about every 30 seconds, I think.
Yeah, I was quite busy.
Yeah, so that's sort of a UK databases conference. Pretty much, I think it's about 300 or 400 people turn up. It's all people doing interesting things with databases. There might be new databases, there might be old databases, but they're generally interesting stuff. Mike's lined up about 562 meetups and hack events to go to in the next 2 weeks.
I personally have had the chance to talk to quite a few different communities. I spent last Thursday bouncing around different random bits of London and was talking to people like Go Squared, who are an analytics company. And being able to talk to them and introduce different concepts is quite fun, because you suddenly have this moment of realisation where their eyes go, I can do that! It's amazing! So we've had a chance. I personally have had a chance to talk, and I also go to a lot of hack events, so talking to people at 4 AM going, what are you building? Don't know, but we're throwing this tech at it. It's
You
great.
should talk about your axe.
Oh, my whopping huge Nordic axe! I really need to take that home to the office.
I'm going to get you a thing to hold it in the office to scare the
If you can get it with two, so we can anticipate the second one next month, that'd be great. But yeah, I personally have managed to win a hack. It's a flipping miracle. The amount of glue and horseshoeing we had to do to get that thing in. Create a universal translator built on about 12 different technologies.
Really? That sounds like good fun. We do audio, we do about written.
Sign language, text, speech.
No way.
Well, by sign language, because none of us actually know sign language, it's gesture, using air quotes to fit that. Yeah, but it worked.
So it's an international competition, this battle hack thing, sponsored by PayPal. So they do, so Mike's flying over to California next month to fight geeks from America.
Oh, it's going to be like Battle Royale, but with axes.
There's no coding.
That bit's over.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So, there we are. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for taking part in this podcast. Pleasure. And much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.
Here's to more. Thank you.
Tap.
Thanks. Thanks.